Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. And man, today's episode of the podcast, I think is going to blow your socks off. It is exciting, my friend. We're talking to actually one of my students who ran a campaign for Quilbie, which raised over $20,000 on Kickstarter. And the cool thing about this is not only is he a student, he's also a listener of this show, right? So all the time, I try to bring on success stories and people on the podcast who've been successful with Kickstarter, Indiegogo, crowdfunding. But every once in a while, we get to have a listener, someone who's a member of the CrowdCrux community on this podcast, and it's always a complete privilege because they're so incredibly transparent, right? They just kind of tell you as it is. You can hear the story as it started from nothing to now being an entirely new product that's in the hands of people all around the world. It's freaking exciting, man. I can't wait for you to listen to this podcast episode. In addition, you're gonna get tons of tactics, tools, advice, and strategies in the way of what works today in 2021, right now on Kickstarter. So this is really cutting edge stuff, fingers on the pulse, right, as I like to say. And I really want you to walk away not only with a lot of cool advice and teachings and tactics, but also I want you to be inspired, man. This shows you that literally anyone out there, if you have a little bit of gumption, if you're willing to put yourself on the line, if you're willing to put yourself out there and promote yourself, and obviously your product, you can actually achieve success. And it's not like something that's, I think, super far reaching. It's something that is realistic. There is a proven path here when it comes to launching a new product in the world. And Quilbie and Jordan came on the show to just kind of share with you exactly how to get started with that. So before we get into that episode, I got two really quick announcements that I want to make here. The first is that if you're interested in kind of really pulling back the hood, fully understanding what goes into a successful crowdfunding campaign, as well as some of the secrets that are out there that I don't talk about publicly. So obviously this podcast, Crowdfunding Demystified, is meant to share with you and to kind of scrape the surface with how to launch a campaign. There are so many secrets and tactics and things that I don't talk about on this show, just because we obviously only have a certain amount of time. So I put together an incredible, in-depth, comprehensive class for you, which I call a masterclass. So this is a masterclass that I've made for you. And basically, if you'd like to register for this, I'm going to share with you a link in just a second. And you can get registered for this on-demand web class. And it's also super exciting because I put a lot of effort into this, a lot of work into this. I tried to share original things that you're not going to find anywhere else. You've been Googling around, you've been searching around. You're not going to find this anywhere else. So if this is interesting to you, if you want to you're ready to kind of buckle down, get serious, and really take the time to take notes and really sink your teeth into this. If you are at that stage, go to this link, crowdcrux.com/masterclass. That is crowdcrux.com/masterclass. That's crowdcrux.com/masterclass. Just go to that link. You can register for when it is available. They aren't available always, so you'll have to kind of put that on your schedule, but I'm excited for you to attend. Let me know what you think, and let's get into today's podcast episode. This podcast episode is sponsored by The Gadget Flow. The Gadget Flow reaches over 28 million people, and they've been around since 2012. They are Indiegogo and Kickstarter experts. They featured over 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns, and if you have a technology or design campaign, it is a great platform to generate awareness and get backers. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a Kickstarter success on the line. Someone who's raised over $20,000 for Quilbie, Protect Your Baby in Any Condition. This is a 3-in-1 cover that uses patent-pending technology to block light, sound, rain, and heat and keep your baby protected, safe, and happy. More than 300 backers. Jordan, welcome to the show. Definitely, man. It's so great to have you on, and I think seeing your story from the beginning, early days to now has just been really inspiring for me. I mean, I've been amazing, and just all the action you've been taking, I think, is really admirable.
Yeah, and it's been, you've obviously been someone who's been super helpful. The whole crowdfunding and Kickstarter thing is something that was new to me, and this was, my first experience. So it was, valuable to get as much information and insight at the early stages, and bounce ideas off of someone like yourself, and that has that experience and insight to how all this works.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of want to just get started telling the listeners a little bit about your background, right? Because you kind of have a background in data analytics, right? And then this was an idea that kind of came into your life. Can you just kind of shed some light on that?
Yeah, so I still work at Nike as my full-time day job, but I've always had a passion for entrepreneurship and doing new and different things, solving different problems. And so I'm a first-time dad. My daughter is now 2 years old, and I think like a lot of products that people create is solving for a problem that they, personally experience, and kind of go through that process of trying to find a solution and then not really finding a solution, so they create it themselves. So that's kind of my story here, and a little bit of the background is we had as being a first-time dad, we kind of went through a lot of the challenges of dealing with, an agitated baby at times, where they can be distracted from light, sound, heat. And so I wanted to create something that would create a more safe, secure, and comfortable environment for the baby, so that when we are out and about, she was more calm and relaxed. And so it's
Agitated baby is an understatement, I'd say.
Yeah, and there were personal experiences, like there are just a few very specific examples. Once being on a plane, at a restaurant.
Oh man.
And there was nothing probably more stressful than those moments when you feel so helpless, right? You have this child you care so much for, and here you are in a public environment, and there's nothing that she doesn't want a nurse. Rocking her to sleep doesn't help. Changing a diaper doesn't help. And she's just in a completely different element, right? With people in commotion around. We're trying to enjoy dinner with a family out at a restaurant, or flying on a plane. And so those are the moments that I kind of, as a sharp point, really tried to set out and solve. And I think the product ended up evolving into something even more versatile than the original idea throughout kind of that process. But it's been fun to, again, combine kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, and also, to your point, leverage some of the experience that I have in my career, also take some of those data and analytic approaches to gain insight throughout the process.
So with Nike, what do you actually do for them there? Like, are you helping them with their ad strategy or their website analytics, or what do you help?
Yeah, so less on the marketing side and actually more on the product and merchandising side. So I've had experience being both in merchandising, essentially merchandising in terms of figuring out what our line plan or assortment of products are, and how those are distributed throughout the different retailers and even different countries throughout the world. Right now, I'm in a more of a data and analytics role, which we've branded as Insights, that's really focused on gaining deep consumer insights as a way to better inform what products we at Nike make, and also how we make them. So we're looking at a lot of different consumer data, both internally and externally, and then how we can better inform decisions with that data is kind of my new role.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So have you done any other products before, or was this your first?
This is my first physical product. I do have another side business that's called Run Doyen. It's an online coaching business for running. But again, very different business model, given that it's a service-driven business model, and this is my first physical products business.
One of the biggest differences, I think, with that is having to create a initial prototype and having to bring something from your idea, right, into your in your head, just to like in the real world. What was the first kind of prototypes like? Like, was this something you just like tried out and looked with different materials around the house, or how did you get started there?
Yeah, exactly. I started there with, I knew that my secret sauce to this product was going to be more of the materials that were built into it. I wasn't necessarily reinventing a design. There are types of baby covers out there on the market, and some well-known brands and ones that have been on Shark Tank and sold millions of units. But when I looked at the market of those products, I didn't really feel like they were offering much protection. They're really just thin layers of cotton or polyester. Essentially, imagine like taking a T-shirt and then just fitting it to fit an infant car seat, for example. It just doesn't really block much. It looks cute, but doesn't do a whole lot. And so I knew that my secret sauce was really going to be in the innovation around materials and R&D there. So I basically, the first thing I did is I bought instruments that would allow me to test the measures that I wanted to improve on, which was kind of light, sound, and heat. So I bought those, just at-home testing devices on Amazon. And then I went to Joann's Fabrics, for example, or went on Amazon, did a ton of research to try to find out what types of properties result in those benefits that I was looking for, and literally just started grabbing all types of materials, trying different combinations of them based on how you stack them and layer them, and probably honestly hundreds or thousands of different types of options until I kind of found the right combination. And every time I got a little bit better. I think the first prototype started with very thick, I was trying to get noise reduction through just stacking more and more layers of cotton inside. And the product became very thick and not very practical or usable for people. And eventually I got smarter and more efficient in how to find materials that could kind of pack the same punch of benefits, but also in a much thinner and usable materials.
Interesting. So yeah, using that sort of analytics approach, you really started with measuring the variables and like how does your materials and your choices with the product impact those variables. Yeah. That's really cool the way you think about that.
Yeah, and I think it's a different approach from, I think a lot of the baby products out there that don't necessarily, they appeal much more to the look and feel and kind of design, and I think that's where I'm taking a little bit of a niche within the market, is really having kind of scientific results to kind of stand behind, and quantifiable and certifiable as well. As after I did some, so once I did my at-home testing, once we had the prototypes, I went on to independent lab testing to then validate those. So it's kind of now
that's intense, man. Yeah. And so when you had this idea and you're like now starting to take action on this, what kind of feedback were you getting from like family and friends and people around you? What did they think about your activities?
Yeah, the challenging thing with, getting feedback, what I realized is oftentimes your friends and family are very, very nice, right? And which is great. And
we would hope so.
But that can kind of be, I think, a pitfall at times, is that they may be shy to be critical and give you some of the feedback, that you really need to improve it. So what I found most helpful is really trying to find strangers that represent your target demographic. And what I did on weekends, I would actually go to the mall and essentially stalk people that were pushing a stroller or with a baby. I would approach them with a $5 or $10 Starbucks gift card and just ask them if I could have, hey, I've got an idea for a baby product. Can I have 5 to 10 minutes of your time? Here's a, no obligation. Here's a $5 or $10 gift card. And most people were super happy to, to spend that time. And I found, before we actually got our final rounds of samples to do user testing, I found that as a very effective way to kind of get that rapid feedback from strangers who were going to be, more critical and honest.
What kind of feedback did you get there?
At that point it was really about the refining this, because at that point I had kind of validated the testing or the performance of the materials. So I was pretty, I think that approach, I tried to be pretty objective and let the science kind of guide the decisions on which materials. But at that point, then it was twofold. It was one, finalizing the dimensions and design and how people would use it. And then also the marketing message. And that's one thing that I learned a lot, both through those in-person kind of feedback groups, as well as doing surveys and running some pre-launch ads with basically a zero budget pre-launch video. I learned a lot about how to position the product and how people saw the benefits of it. I think my original approach was more about speaking to the sound benefits as a way to reduce the volume of your baby's cry, because I felt like that kind of reduced stress for the parent, given that they would.
Not gonna affect the surrounding environment as much.
Right.
Yeah.
That was kind of, I was kind of going at that pain point of like, hey, you have a crying baby, that crying, like there's nothing you can do about that crying baby. You've tried everything. They're going to cry anyways. But at least try to reduce that level of stress that you and the other people that around you, again, whether on an airplane or in a restaurant that hear. However, that was not received well at all among parents. They just didn't like that message of having the baby be the problem, essentially, right? It made the baby the problem, and you're trying to kind of silence the baby. And they're totally right. And so at the end of the day, I learned a lot through that process, not both in terms of making some of those fine-tune adjustments with the product, but also how to communicate the product. And that really informed, our final message and script for the video as well, and getting that fine-tuned. So if I hadn't done that, I feel like I would have launched with a video and a message that probably would have gotten a little bit of more negative backlash. Instead, I kind of took my medicine and got that backlash a little bit first in a more informal manner before kind of going big with things. So I would encourage people to really not only use that feedback process for refining the product, but also your marketing message and positioning for the product.
It's interesting because like when you're first in the early stages of the idea, it's perfect
Exactly.
in your head, right? Like this is going to work and this is the messaging. It's going to connect
Exactly.
really well. And then the second it collides with reality, it's like, oh wait, maybe people don't care about that as much as I thought they did.
Yep.
And like you make all these tiny little refinements as you're then fitting the idea from your head into the real world.
I completely agree. I think that's, as a new creator, inventor of our product, you have to, I think, yes, you're going to have this, you have this idea in your head and you think you've got it all figured out. You have this new invention that nobody's ever done for, and it's going to be the greatest thing. But I think you're 100% right, is you've got to be willing to move and adapt from that original idea and take in that feedback to make it, the perfect product for that target consumer. You're not building this product to sell it to yourself. You're building it to sell to some sort of target consumer that you're trying to solve for. And so I think it's always important to have them at the forefront and them be the guiding voice that really, guides your design and development process.
Now, when you were going out there and you were getting feedback from random strangers in a mall, most people would be a little bit too shy to do that. How were you able to persist in doing that? Do you have like sales experience, or you were just like, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it takes? Like, where did that come from?
And that's funny because I hated doing it. I am not I'm an introvert. I'm not a salesman. And there were people sometimes I would like stalk for like 5 or 10 minutes, kind of walking, like, yeah, these people look perfect.
Local man stalks baby.
Following them, kind of like, wanting to approach them, and then I just couldn't kind of find the nerve or feel like it was the right situation, So, it was. I hate cold calling. I'm not a good like door to door type person or cold calling person. It's not in my nature. But I think I just felt how important it was to get this idea in front of real people that were my target demographic and strangers that were going to offer real feedback. And so, it was kind of overcoming, like everything you just described, it fits me exactly. And so it was a little bit of overcoming that fear, and it was a difficult process, but most people were super receptive to it. Like I didn't get anybody that just told me to bug off. And so it worked out great.
Yeah, I think the fact you had a little reward for them too is also
Totally.
really helpful. Awesome. So basically, you come up with this idea, you're testing everything. At what point does Kickstarter or crowdfunding come into the picture there? Like, how did you hear about that or learn about that?
Yeah, I had it in mind from the very beginning, I guess. And I didn't know a whole lot. Like I'd heard I hadn't backed a project before. I'd always heard about Kickstarter. I watch a lot of Shark Tank, and you hear, it seems like more and more companies that you see on Shark Tank now, they talk about their story starting on Kickstarter. So, I had this idea for a product. I'd always kind of heard about Kickstarter, but never really. And I was like, this is, I think I should give this a try. And so. Yeah, I think a couple things that have that I underestimated about Kickstarter though, is the challenge with a baby product. Being that when you're on Kickstarter, you're essentially taking pre-orders and delivering, depending on your manufacturing and logistics timelines, several plus months out in advance. The challenge,
When the kid's gonna grow
exactly.
up, yeah, the age
Right. So
component.
I'm selling a product that has use of the most utility from 0 to 6 months when a baby is born. And now when I'm launching on Kickstarter, I'm not delivering the product for 4 to 5 months or even in my pre-launch phase, 6+ months. And so that
Mm,
essentially eliminated my audience of people who already had a baby. Like I had to find an audience of people who were actually pregnant and expecting a baby. And so the challenge that I really faced throughout this whole thing is I think that my audience overlap between people who are on Kickstarter was just so small between people who are familiar and kind of on this Kickstarter, familiar with what Kickstarter is, and then those people just happen to also be pregnant right now, right? And because
yeah, there's a lot of
that
stars
was
that
the
have
only
to align
timeline
there.
that really
Yeah.
worked. And even if you're pregnant now, you would still not get the product maybe to your, if you're going to deliver in 3 months, you then only have maybe 3 months of utility of my product. And so it's already still diminished. So ideally, I'm trying to find people who are like, pregnant
Yeah,
within the
yeah.
past couple months. So that was the challenge with
So,
Kickstarter for sure.
mhm. So when we first started working together, um, I forget if you had discovered me from the podcast or YouTube, but I think we had a pretty good synergy. And to me, the big thing that was missing was the pre-launch, and that's where I think a lot of our
Hmm.
focus is on, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think to your point, I think, as I mentioned, you were super helpful. I think I read your book. I found you on YouTube, the podcast, and kind of everything. And I was like, I got to reach out to this guy and get some more one-on-one help.
Just candidly, like, how did your ads go? Because
Yeah,
I remember the day that you then started to run ads, and you were surprised that like people were joining your
yeah,
group and like joining your email list. It was so
yeah.
cool to watch.
So,
Also,
and that's where I was pleasantly surprised. I underestimated or overestimated, I guess, the cost that it would take to get people on our pre-launch page and into our Facebook group. I felt like, in the Facebook group was your idea to take people who hit your pre-launch page, opt in, and then send them and then what I did is send them a confirmation page, to say, hey, as the next step, join this Facebook group, and we got a pretty high conversion rate there and another touch point. So that was going, and like we got that down to about $1 per
that's
person,
crazy.
right,
Yeah,
per
that's
person
really good.
opting into our group. And so that was great. And like I was like, this is incredible. Like I'm getting people, they're willing to give their email out. Like I'm getting a lot of people. I think we ended up building the list up to about 7,000 people. And that was much more than I anticipated, but I kept spending a little bit more in ads there because I felt like the rate at getting those opt-ins was so low. So
Yeah,
I kept
yeah.
kept kind of pushing there.
I think one of the yeah, so you're getting a ton of good feedback as well on like your
Yeah,
video, the best ones that are performing, creatives, all that
exactly.
stuff. I think the hardest part in the pre-launch is probably validating that these are
Yeah.
buyers, right, and that they have an awareness of
Yep.
Kickstarter. To me, that's like the biggest challenge. Are you looking for help with the fulfillment side of your rewards on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or any other crowdfunding website? Fulfillment is literally the gold standard when it comes to crowdfunding reward fulfillment. These guys will help you ship out your products, your packages, your orders to all of your customers and your backers. They've been working in this industry for a really long time. I totally vouch for their services, and they'll even do things like answer simple questions for you on fulfillment and shipping and figuring out how to get your products into the hands of your customers in the easiest way possible. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can go to fulfillright.com or crowdcrux.com/fulfillright, and that will take you to them. Again, that is FULFILLRITE.com.
100% agree. And that's what we then, so where I overestimated was the cost to try to get those people to opt in, but what I underestimated was the challenge to then get those people to convert to your Kickstarter campaign. I think, as I mentioned, we had that one headwind, a major headwind again, of probably a lot of those people didn't realize when they opted in that this, a lot of those people probably had babies right now, and then they saw the delivery timeline was May, and they're like, oh gosh, my kid's going to be 1 year old by then. So we lost a lot of people there, and that was just really hard to screen out in that phase. I tried to target people who were more pregnancy related interests and not necessarily people who had kids, but it's a really hard demographic to target. But
it's pretty much half and half too. Like your community seems to be half people who have backed a campaign before and half new backers, right?
Yeah, and that was probably I was pleasantly surprised actually how much organic Kickstarter traffic we got. I think ones that we didn't have to market, just organically found it through the Kickstarter platform. So that was kind of, those are free sales in terms of not having to spend marketing ads. I think that the ceiling was just very low in terms of the amount of people that happen to already be on Kickstarter and were currently pregnant. So I think we were able to probably capture most of that market where that overlap was between people who are already on Kickstarter and people who are pregnant. But I think there was just kind of, a ceiling to that many people. And then to your point, trying to convert people who aren't aware with Kickstarter was a real challenge, especially on, I think one specific thing to be aware of is the mobile experience on Kickstarter, I think is somewhat poor. People don't even know how to find the price, right? Because when you go to mobile, there's a button you have to click that says back this project, and then that's what takes you to the rewards. I can't tell you how many people we drove through mobile traffic via, ads or whatever. They would land on the campaign page and they're like, where the heck do I find the price on this thing? How do I order? And they didn't even know to click this button that says back this project. And so it's an unfamiliar vernacular for a lot of people of this concept of backing a project when they're trained to look for a buy now option and see a price, a price right on the front that says, $59.99 buy now. And so that's challenging to overcome a lot of those barriers that for a new Kickstarter audience.
Mm-hmm. I do have to say, like, your video really impressed me, man. I mean, I don't know how long it took you to pull that together, but it was really good, and all the product testers in it. It looks super well done. I know you did it for like a pretty reasonable budget as well.
Yeah,
so
and I guess with that, I'll awesome. Shout out to my videographers, Mike Morris with Fiber Creative here in Portland, and to that point, he was super flexible. I approached him early on. I brought him into the journey, let him know, like, hey, I'm working on a shoestring budget, but I think he understood the vision. And I think all the pieces really came together. To your point before, part of the success of that, I think, was testing a lot of that creative and messaging early on. Like, I had written out a script months before we filmed the video, and the final script that we used was 100% different. If we would have just gone with my original pitch, essentially, it would have been entirely different. But yeah, and then having been able to, regarding those testers, how we actually, one thing that I hadn't hit on yet on the testing phase is another approach that I used was, I ran ads specifically targeted here in the Portland, Oregon area, so that I built out a specific list of people that I knew were in this area and that I could basically hand off a sample to. And then I reached out, once I got a decent list of those, I reached out to those people asking if they wanted a free sample to test. And I got incredible feedback there. And that was kind of our final round of revisions where I thought I had, and when I gave it to these testers, I thought I had the final product. I basically just wanted validation. Of course, out of that and having them use it for, a few months, I got a whole new level of insight in terms of things that they wanted. That inspired it to actually go from a 2-in-1 cover to a 3-in-1 cover, being a stroller cover use as well. That just took a few adjustments. That one of our users was like, "Hey, I'm kind of using it like this. I know it's not intended to, but," and I was like, "You know what? I can make it even better like that with these few adjustments." We added a peekaboo flap so that people wanted to more without having to lift the whole thing up and look in. We changed the whole location, so there were just some like last final revisions, just crucial elements that came through that process. And then in return too, they were super happy with the product and to be a part of that journey and wanted to participate in our video as well.
So I was looking at your Kicktrack stats. So it looks like you hit your goal in the first 3 days, right? On the third day, it looks like you surpassed it. What did that feel like? Because before this is just an idea in your mind, you're doing the pre-launch, you're getting feedback there, and then finally you hit your goal. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it's exciting to get that validation. And a lot of those, again, how we did that was through that kind of pre-launch phase. That was where most of those people were coming from, was that list that we had built up prior. But I think it is one thing to what I believe too is you never really can validate idea until you can get strangers to give you their hard-earned money for it. And so definitely. Up until then, right, it had just been people telling me it's a great idea, this is great. But yeah, seeing, once you get those first few $1,000s and then hit, like, okay, people are actually, it's hard to get people to hand over their money, their hard-earned money for something. And like, these are people that believe in enough in it that they're actually willing to give their own money in exchange for this, right? And I think, once you start to kind of get into the few $1,000+ it starts to get that validation, that people, that you have a product and it's something that can turn into a business. And I think that was the ultimate goal for Kickstarter, right? I think it's not the end goal to, Kickstarter is not your end goal. It's really the beginning, hopefully, of a business, and it's building.
It's Kickstarting, exactly. Yeah. They named it so well there. So, yeah. So I think that's awesome, man. And I kind of want to ask you just a few more questions about like your live experience here, right? So when you went live with Kickstarter, I think one of the hardest things is to like maintain momentum and even run Facebook ads, right? When you're live. What was your experience like with that? Do you have any tips you could pass on there?
Yeah, I mean, you if you read, any sort of book, blogs, or any of your content, right? I mean, to talk about the dreadful mid-campaign slump, it's real for sure. You launch and you have hopefully this launch of backers, a pre-launch list that's going to jump in right away. You have your friends and family that are going to go in and help you out, and you kind of get this big surge right away. And then it's kind of up to you, like, basically, I think, can you find, I would think that there's, I think there are a few exceptions where from there it just takes off. You look at a lot of these,
they're definitely
these uber successful campaigns that raise millions of dollars. And I think if you have a home run product that really fits the masses of the Kickstarter audience, like a tech or travel product, you see some of those that take off. I think it's just important for creators to realize that those are a little bit more like unicorns than the norm, right? That you're just going to have this one product, it's just going to go viral, and it's just going to massively fun from day one and just keep going up. I think that's really, really hard to do, but there are a few of those success stories. But after that, I think it's trying to find, basically, can you find a way to acquire a customer or a backer, in a way that is less
profitable,
in an amount that is less than your profit margin out the door. And transparently, we just couldn't really find a way to effectively do that because of a lot of those headwinds of trying to convince new people about what Kickstarter is and trying to find people who were currently pregnant and willing to wait, 5 or 6 months for this product. It was really challenging to do. And so we never really found a sweet spot. One thing that we did try, and I mentioned this to you, Sal, and it was better but not quite profitable, was actually sending people to when we were live, sending people to instead of
page,
basically a page on our website that would educate a little bit more about what Kickstarter is, and then address some of those common questions, because knowing that traffic was coming from mobile, basically we're sending them from a Facebook ad, which is almost entirely mobile these days. And then you can send them to a page and basically saying, hey, if you're not familiar with Kickstarter, here's what you're about to see before you click this, button. And then the next call to action button was, pre-order now on Kickstarter. We
And that did better than when you were just sending them to
Yeah, better.
Kickstarter?
I went from, on my own ads, I went from basically getting nothing without that to at least getting something, but not quite profitable. And
Profitable,
the
yeah.
other challenge though, when I mention this is obviously Kickstarter doesn't allow Facebook Pixel to be installed. So it is challenging to really track your marketing spend
Your
and conversion rate.
conversion-based
And there are some
marketing,
tricks like, Pixel Me and some other kind of basically redirect links that allow you that. But it is difficult it's difficult to set up a way to do that.
It's a system, yeah. It's to hack
Yeah,
that system. And it takes a lot of work,
totally.
definitely. And yeah, I've said this so many times that Kickstarter needs to change that,
Yeah.
but they would, I think, really help creators a lot, honestly, if they did, because then they don't have to work with some of these other big marketing companies sometimes.
Exactly.
But that's just kind of how their platform is,
Yeah.
right? Well, that's so cool to hear, and just to see you also try out that technique was very innovative, in my opinion. And the reason I think a lot of people just get stuck in like the rut of this is how it's done, this is how other companies are doing it. But I really like the innovative approach you took with your marketing, trying something out new and actually finding it did work a little bit better for you.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, and it's kind of the approach that we take at Nike, and I've kind of learned through the process there is just really start with the end customer in mind. And I think some of your best ideas are going to be inspired by problems or challenges that people are having. And so that idea was really inspired by all those questions and concerns about, okay, people are landing on this mobile, on the mobile experience of Kickstarter, and they're having all these challenges and questions. How can I help make that experience better for them, right? And I think that was the solution that I kind of came up with. And there may be other solutions, but I think, some of the best and most innovative ideas, whether it's a physical product or it's, some sort of digital solution to help your conversion like that. I think it's understand what is your customer, what problems they're going through, what is their journey, and then how can you make that as pain-free and easy as possible. And I think that's kind of what inspired that idea. It was just basically solving a problem that people were having, which was I don't even understand how to order this product when I get to this page.
Yeah, definitely. One of the final questions I have for you here is a lot of people have hesitancy around pricing, right? And, I think in some ways the Kickstarter is testing out pricing a bit. So like you had a percentage discount there for your rewards. What are your thoughts on pricing? Are you happy with how you figured that out? Was there any thought process you went through for that?
Yeah, I think my initial feeling with Kickstarter was that people wanted to back the projects to get, a big discount. I think more and more that's not necessarily the case. It's people that want to be the first to get a product. I think people do expect a discount, though. I think that you have to offer something off of what your expected retail price is. But I don't know. I see a lot of campaigns just, I don't see a direct correlation between success of campaigns and the amount of discount that they're offering. I mean, you see a lot of campaigns that are super successful with, 15 kind of that 15% range sort of discount that they're claiming. You see a lot of people sandbag too, and they're like, get this 65% off. And, I think they're probably kind of sandbagging what their actual retail price would be if they even plan to go into retail with it. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I think they expect, a discounted price based on whatever your suggested retail price is. You may not even know that yet. But and that was part of, I think part of the surveys that I did too was asking people, their price. One thing that I would say is that people are naturally going to kind of lowball you, right? When you're asking your pre-launch backers how much you're willing to pay for this. And so I would not necessarily always take their word exactly for it because they're trying to influence you to price it low because they may have intent to buy it. So be careful of that. But at the end of the day, I think I looked at it I wanted to price it fair, but a way that was also profitable and made sense for a business. So I didn't want to be like a price gouger. And
Yeah,
so that's kind
of
of where
course
we
not.
settled on the prices that we're mostly in kind of that 15 to 35% off, depending on the tier of price.
So when you're telling your friends and your family about this wacky and wild and fun Kickstarter campaign that
Hmm.
you did, was there any part that sticks out to you as like the most rewarding part of the process?
In terms of,
In terms of like that you just really look
yeah.
back on and you're like, that was awesome, you know?
Yeah, I think it's some of the messages that you get from people just being so excited. Again, it's great to have the friends and family validation, and like friends and family were just so supportive, and this couldn't have been possible without them. But then seeing like some of the strangers reach out and say how excited they are about the products. Um,
That's so rare that that would happen,
yeah.
you know? Like a traditional e-commerce product isn't going to get that level of emotional
Right.
investment, really.
And that's so, yeah, I
So
think
it's
that that's the
interesting to
most
see that.
rewarding part is seeing people excited, or even some of like the comments on, our Facebook ads and people saying how excited they are and tagging their other friends. So seeing that when there's like you have no idea who these people are, but they're excited about your idea really gives you kind of that validation that you're helping to change, other people's lives for the better. You've created something that they feel is going to make their life better or easier, and I think that is super super rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like you've proven something to yourself, right? You started out with coaching, and obviously you also have your full time job, but you've proven that you can pull together a product, you can do the research, you can execute on it, you can sell it, you can get funding for it. Like I think you've proven a lot of stuff this year, in this past year to yourself. Where do you see yourself going in the future? Are you going to continue to have different lines with Quilbie? Do you think you're going to continue to promote this via e-commerce or try to get into retail outlets? Like, what's your goal here?
Yeah, exactly. I think so the next step is definitely building out our e-commerce business, and that's what we're starting already right now. So we're beginning production just after the Chinese New Year is over, and so we'll begin production at the end of February. We'll have that complete at the end of March, and they're looking to fulfill to our backers in early May. Simultaneously, kind of during these next few months while we're going through that manufacturing and fulfillment process, we're starting to build out basically our Amazon store and Shopify store. And so we're ordering inventory not just to fulfill, the our backers, but also excess inventory to then kickstart kind of our direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. And so, our plan initially is to focus direct-to-consumer online e-commerce, and then potentially explore, other wholesale accounts, right? Like someone
Retail,
like
yeah.
Bye Bye Baby or maybe Target. I think my strategy, if going the wholesale route, would be to really focus on channels of distribution wherever people register, do baby registries. So I think this is the perfect product that would fit on a baby registry. So I think my distribution strategy on the wholesale side would always try to follow those retailers that have a large audience of people who are creating baby registries with them.
Yeah, that's super
Yep.
smart. Definitely. I can see you going really far with this product, and I hope that one day I'll also see you on Shark Tank among some of those other baby
Yeah, it's
products.
funny how many, the first thing a lot of friends and family say is when you share the idea, oh, you got to go on Shark Tank with this. So maybe that's the next step. I think definitely, having watched the show a lot, I think it's great, before you approach that type of avenue, have some validation of sales. Kickstarter is great, but then I think actually having some direct-to-consumer e-commerce sales prior will make those that pitch go a
I
little
agree. Yeah.
smoother.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Where can people go learn more and check out your product?
Yeah, we'll always have, again, it's going to be a little bit of a transition phase between this pre-order and launch our product, but Quilbie.com, again, just to spell it, Quilbie.com, will always direct you to either a pre-order option. We're on Indiegogo in demand right now. And then, that website link will convert to our online store as soon as that's ready.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it and being very candid and transparent. And I think your journey is really inspirational, and everything you've had to push through to get to this point in time, I think is test it you definitely. But I mean, you've just like passed every test with flying colors, and I can only imagine that's going to continue into the future. So I wish you a lot of success.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And thanks again to you for your guidance and mentorship throughout this. Yeah, it's been a learning journey for sure, and a lot of positive experiences to come from it. So it's been great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Man, this is an incredible interview. I hope you really enjoyed it. You took away a lot of good stuff. You got the fire in the belly going a bit, and you're excited. You're rearing to go. You're ready to really take action on this Kickstarter campaign. And when I was first getting started in the industry back in 2012, I kind of view myself as an educator, and I still do. At the end of the day, I love teaching. I love figuring things out and kind of sharing it with you in a no-nonsense fashion. I'm one of those guys that I don't like it when people use fancy words. I don't like it when people use terminology that I don't understand. I just want you to tell me as it is, plain and simple, using English. Teach me how to do something. That's kind of where my entire podcast came about, is just talking with people, having a normal conversation and trying to understand what went into their successful campaign. And they're so generous to be able to share that with you, right? And that inspiration has led me through my entire career, writing books for you, putting together courses for you, putting out YouTube videos for you, podcasts, etc. And that's really just been, the hallmark, I'd say, of my entire career. Now, when it comes to this, at the same time, as I started to go and as I started to learn more and do more and more coaching calls and, getting to know my students better and working on projects and agents and clients, what I realized is that it's not just about that. There's also a hidden component. And that component has a little bit to do with motivation, but it also has to do with some of the stuff that you just aren't seeing that's happening behind the scenes, right? So like, for example, if you see a car and that car is driving down the road really fast, it's your first time ever seeing a car. Let's just say you're an alien. You flew here from another planet. You see this car. You're like, this thing looks beautiful. It's amazing. I want one, right? If you're a red-blooded American male or you're red-blooded anywhere, you probably want a really nice looking car, right? But then you actually start to think a little bit about what's actually behind the hood. What is the engine that powers that car? What are the types of tires that are on it, right? What is the difference between this one and that one? And why is it that some cars are so much better than others and some literally are like from the future, right? Like Tesla. So it's actually not so much what you see on the outside. It's really what's happening in the inner workings of the engine. It's the make and the mold. It's the inside, the interior that matters so much more than that exterior appearance. And that kind of analogy can be said very much of Kickstarter, because we look at these public-facing campaigns, something that's a campaign has raised $300,000 or $800,000, and you're like, wow, that's so incredible. I could never do something like that, or I don't have the brains to be able to pull that off. And what I've done over my entire career is I've really tried to pull back the curtain and kind of get into the inner workings of the campaign. So who is working on this? What is the team dynamic like? How did they get such good marketing? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? While some campaigns look really great on the outside surface, there's also sometimes some things that are not so great that are working on the inside, right? And some where it's like, oh, this is like a $200K raise. And all of a sudden you find out that they went into in demand, or they did a post fundraising campaign and they ended up raising double that, right? And you don't hear about those kinds of stories by virtue of your access. So the more that I've come to learn and grow in this industry, and I've been in the industry for 8 years now, what I've come to realize is that it's not just my job to teach, it's also my job to give you access. Because let's be honest, like, you're planning for this campaign probably maybe after work, maybe you already have another business. It only has partial attention for you. It doesn't have your full attention. And the only way you can speed up the process is if you do have someone on the inside who's just communicating to you, okay, this is what these guys are doing. This is what's happening behind the scenes. This is what you have to do. It's almost kind of like my duty or my obligation in a sense to communicate that so that you also have the same level playing field as some of these bigger corporations and these bigger companies who just have boatloads of money to throw at a campaign and don't even really care. Like, they're not super invested in the process. They're just working with really ritzy, overpriced agencies and all this kind of stuff. If you're a little guy and you're trying to compete with them, and you do have some resources, you do have a little bit of funding there to be able to jumpstart this thing, but you're like, I want to use this smartly. I want to use this intelligently. And more important, I want to actually know what's happening behind the scenes. I put together this masterclass exactly for you. It will show you how to smash your goal on Kickstarter. And what's more, I share tons of secrets, tons of tactics, tons of stuff that a lot of people out there just aren't talking about. I view it as my public duty in a way, probably why I'm so freaking passionate, obviously, about this. But I also think that taking these experiences and taking this knowledge and being able to act on it and launch a successful campaign, to me, that is so freaking cool, because then you can come on the show just like today's podcast guest and you can share what works. And it's this cool, like, karmic cycle, right? I'm much more about purpose and mission than I am about just kind of making money, making a quick buck, right? And that's why I've been in the industry for so long. So if this sounds interesting to you, if you want to gain access to this is not for the faint of heart. This is not for someone who just wants, a 5-minute YouTube video or a really quick blog article that they can read in 2 minutes and like scrape the surface of it. This is someone who wants to go deep. You really have to want this, and you have to be willing to take notes as you're going through this class that I've set up for you. You can register if you want. You can go to crowdcrux.com/masterclass. That is crowdcrux.com/masterclass. That's crowdcrux.com/masterclass. That link will take you there. You can register for a time that fits you. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope you take away a ton of stuff. And more importantly, please act on it. These are deadly, lethal weapons that marketing ninjas will use. And rather than just dishing out a bunch of money to a company, instead, you can learn this and at least know what that company is doing if in the future you do end up hiring someone to help you with this. So that link, crowdcrux.com/masterclass. I'll see you there. I'm excited. And look forward to you also when it comes to listening to some other episodes. If you haven't yet, go give a rating and review on iTunes. Appreciate it so much. I'll see you next time.